infrastructure on the budget was being funded? Nothing. Nothing. These bonds and bills have funded nothing in our budget. And yet, do you know how much interest we have paid for 5.1 trillion over 10 years? We have paid them a total of 2.7 trillion in interest payments. This is criminality beyond your imagination. And there are some key banks here that have perpetuated this fraud. KCB, Cooperative Bank, Equity Bank. Those are three banks that have perpetuated a very clear fraud on the Kenyan public, us as depositors, and us as taxpayers, and made humongous profits, become oligarchs against the sovereign, against us. And we must start saying we are not going to take this rubbish anymore. And this rubbish goes this way. If you have deposits in those banks, if your parents have deposits in those banks, we should pull them out tomorrow, not today, not yesterday, not the day after, tomorrow, if not today. Remove that money. Take it to banks that are not defrauding us, because what is happening there is a fraud of the highest proportions. I want to go back to the London Club debts. These bonds, Eurobonds, these syndicated bonds, these syndicated loans, none of those appear on the budget. But one underlying fact you will find is that somewhere along the way, like you saw recently with the latest payments of Eurobond, the last payment of Eurobond was paid 500 so-called billion balance, right, of the 2 billion we had borrowed. That was paid by World Bank, IMF. Why are they underwriting money that never came to us? Who is this that they are backing? So here they are. They encourage us to take those very expensive loans, knowing full well they are not on a budget. And then when we can't pay, IMF comes up and it starts rattling. Oh, we can save you, but these are the conditions. And the conditions become a matter they become a matter of our slavery. Now, all this information I'm giving is in the public domain. Our forensic audit is in the public domain. We got it from public documents. We are not trying to create new documentation. And we've been speaking this for the last 2 years. Kenyans need to understand categorically that we are in a mode of slavery. And I'll perpetuate this slavery by going back to the point where we were saying today 80% of our tax revenue is going to one item called debt. These debts I'm talking about, and which we have already paid for, don't owe, but we are going to keep being made to pay unless we cut off this chain because it is illegal. We do not owe it. This coming financial year, 2024-2025, the estimate from the Treasury of debt payments, keeping the current exchange rate, is 1.853164. In other words, 1.853 trillion shillings is going towards the debt payments this financial year of 2024-2025. You come to the year 2025-2026, it is 2.2 trillion to be paid to debt payments. You go to the next year, 2026-2027, is 2.352. And remember, we are getting what you call diminishing returns on our revenue, the Laffer curve, which is the maximum you can squeeze out of us. There is no item in our budget that is taking so much money. People are complaining about confidential funds of 700 million shillings. Look at this year. You tell me which item is taking over 1.8 trillion, one single item in debt payments, in any payment. Nothing is doing that. Nothing at all. This is the tragedy that we are living in. We are in slavery. And we are in such slavery that William Ruto is soon going to come and tell us that he can no longer pay it. And that we have been unable to pay it because, you people rejected the finance bill. Now I cannot raise revenue. So now I have to default on this payment. And the default means that they now start coming to your accounts. They start looking for your deposits. And they start telling you that you've got to take a share of this. Otherwise, the banks will close. And we're going to have serious problems here. Ghana, Ghana, Ghana went through this. And Ghana are suffering today. They are suffering from 2022 December, where 70%, 70 shillings of every 100 went to debt. They are suffering. And I can tell you, it is so tragic because you go back to the London Club debts. You go back to these so-called Mzungus guy that he's talking about, these criminals that have perpetuated this fraud even in places like Malaysia and gotten caught. These big firms called JP Morgan Chase, they have been part of a conspiracy because if you are going to loan anybody money, the first thing you must do is your due diligence. What are you giving this money for? Is it in line with the laws of Kenya? Which project is being funded? The Euro bond that was taken in 2013. Our investigation is very clear on this. It started an investigation all the way back in 2014 when I can tell you here on this show, a man called Jacob Juma, the late, he was my friend, came to visit me. And he tells me, Jimmy, I can tell you there's something fishy going on here. And you know all he had? He was just simply reading what are called the the National Treasury quarterly reports. That is all. And he said, the president stood up when he said he's taking the Eurobond. And he said, because he's taking the Eurobond, they are not going to borrow domestically. The estimate at the time was about 300 billion shillings. So 3 billion almost a Eurobond that he was taking. But when I look at the quarterly reports from the National Treasury, it seems they still borrow domestically from the local banks. And that's their quarterly report, not the budget, quarterly report. And they are not recording what happened to the Eurobond. So we started asking some questions. Unfortunately, we got the opposition leader, Raila Amolo Odinga at the time, to write a letter to the Treasury to ask where are these Euro bonds? The 2 billion you say you borrowed, what has happened to it? On a bit of a scare for the then Minister of Finance called Rotich, he released documentation. And he showed the following, that $1 billion, they went out into the market and they managed to get $2 billion early 2014. In fact, by May 2014. And that $2 billion, they showed us what is called the expenditure pattern of those dollars. So they said one of the first 1 billion, $650 million of that money went to pay a syndicated loan of Mwai Kibaki directly to a bank called Barclays Bank. In fact, Standard Chartered, sorry. And they showed us a SWIFT transfer of that amount. Then a SWIFT transfer is to show, like you get an RTGS that shows from point A to point B, it went to the account and was credited. Then they showed us that 350 balance of that first $1 billion, it went directly to the consolidated fund, exchequer account 00010,03987. And they showed us very clearly that account. 350 credited. We said, hallelujah, asante sana. Very good work. Then we said, where's the second one? They said, oh, the second one, we hung on to until September of that year. We don't know why they asked JP Morgan Chase to hang on to that. But they said it also came. We said, show us, like you showed us of the 350, show us this amount of 1 billion, how it came to the Treasury. Said, because the 350 that came to the Treasury, it came to the central bank, account number 1, it showed categorically that you had a SWIFT transfer. You even had your letters from CBK addressed to the Treasury showing the exchange rate confirmation that you transferred to Kenya shillings. Show us the same for this $1 billion in September. They sent and put up a SWIFT transfer. But that SWIFT transfer did not show us where that money went. It was completely blackened out. Apart from the top, where you see it leaving an account at JP Morgan Chase, the rest was completely blackened out. Then they tried to quickly show us an amount in December that was directly from Citibank, what they called tap sales of $815 billion, right? That $815 billion, they showed us the SWIFT transfer. It came to an account they had now created in the central bank called a sovereign wealth account, some 10,12674 account, not the consolidated fund. We said, And then they showed us the communication from the same central bank saying we have credited this amount with an exchange rate of this value. We said, very good. Can you go back to the one of September? Where is it? They never, ever showed us. We eventually saw it in the Auditor General Special Audit of the Eurobond, done by Edward Auko. And Edward Auko, in his report, says that this amount entered an account called 8,214 something. We said, what account is this? We don't know it. We don't know it at all. What is this account? We never got a further explanation. But nobody dared to present even one iota of that SWIFT transfer like they had done for the others. Even the letter exchanging the amount from dollars to Kenya shillings, central bank saying this is the exchange value amount, they didn't show us. What we know is that that money, nobody has provided evidence that it entered this country. Now, the Auditor General in his report further goes to say that all these amounts cannot be attached to not even one project. And actually, even in his conclusion, says that when he asked the Treasury, what were these monies so-called used for? The Treasury says that these funds are fungible. In other words, they're interchangeable. They can do what they want with them. In other words, they admitted they are breaking the law. That is just one Eurobond of $2 billion. One did not come here. They subsequently took another 5. Please take note. They subsequently took another 7 in syndicated loans. We cannot find anywhere in our budget and in our books. Now, Kenyans, are we going to continually accept that we are going to become slaves and have agreed to become slaves because this is what is called modern day slavery? Now, and for generations to come, the perpetuating our poverty and our slavery. In the old days, slavery was something that was done with chains put to our hands and our feet. That is what is happening here with this debt. Debt has now been used by our own oligarchs, our own people in power, and of course, in collaboration with others outside this land. Others outside this land who know what is going on, who know the illegalities of what has been perpetuated, to ensure that we are slaves to them in perpetuity. You can complain about the finance bill today or tomorrow, which are tax-raising measures, but we are going down so fast as a nation. The poverty rates are increasing by the day because of one item. Anything that is collected from us is going to others, and it never came to our use. And it's going in such large amounts. It is strangling us. It is finishing us for generations to come. And my proposal has been very clear. What is not in our laws, what does not exist in our constitution, is not liable to the sovereign. We are not and should not pay it. We must cut this chain off our neck. We must remove it. And those who put us in this mess must pay the ultimate price of justice for the people of Kenya because they have caused havoc to our lives. We have said continually that this regime will not change it because it was part and parcel of doing what we are suffering. They are not going to hang themselves. So William Ruto should not pretend that he can set up a task force to come and whitewash what he knows he's capable to. He is not going to tell us that. That we will not accept. This is a fraud of monumental proportions. We are unlike other countries that have had to shut down because of debt. Ours, we do not have. And I can tell you with all the sums we have paid, my fellow Kenyans, we do not owe any debt to anybody. We do not. In fact, if we remove that debt from our books, I can tell you have a reduction of taxation and you'll have money in your pockets like you've never seen before. But people are hostage to their own creations. And we must reach a stage now where we say we are going to cut off. We are not going to be anybody's slaves. And we must cut this link. And those who are perpetuating it must face justice. And those foreigners who have been part of this, who have been perpetuating this, who know what they are doing to our demise as a country, we will also follow you. We will look for you. You are criminals. You have aided criminality. In Malaysia, you were found. In Mozambique, you were found. You shall be found even in Kenya. And those who are protecting them, please. We used to have big friends. The West have been good friends of Kenya in the past. Why do you want us to be your slaves? We are just as good, if not better than you. We deserve more, and we are not going to take this nonsense anymore. So, my fellow Kenyans, we start with our own. Those who are perpetuating our slavery in something called domestic debt, those culprits, those oligarchs, must be dealt with now. Tomorrow, the day after that, go take your money from those banks. Tell them they are not at liberty to continue your slavery. Tell those banks that decide they are going to put money in bonds and bills to our detriment, bonds and bills, money that does not enter the consolidated fund, money that is going to buy bullets to kill our children, that we cannot account for. We are not going to agree anymore. Stop them and tell them that you are going to go and greet them if they perpetuate this mentality. But now that they have done it and they have sunk us, take your money back. Tell them you are going to put to enterprises and banks that are not perpetuating your slavery. Let us start at home and we shall deal with the rest one after the other. Asanteni sana, Eric.
All right. Oh, oh. My goodness. So you, Jimmy, can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
So you, what have you done or what are you doing in your position? Because I know you are capable. You have the means. What are you doing in your position to ensure
Yes.
that justice on this economic fraud is given to Kenyans? Because Kenyans right now are unable to put money in their pockets.
That's
is
correct.
Bad.
That's correct, Amerix. And I can tell you they will not be able to. As long as we have this monster, they will not. So the first thing is that we must get rid of these people from power. Anybody that has aided and abated this must get out of power. We must have a fresh broom. They must be removed from power because they will never accept to cut off this chain. They were part of creating it. So we must get power. That is number one. And this revolution, I want to congratulate this revolution. This is the only way. I want to congratulate those who are doing it. I want to say categorically here, I condole with the soldiers, the fallen soldiers of this revolution. And you shall one day receive commendations from a government that understands that you are heroes of this republic. We must cut off this chain, and it comes by cutting off these people in power. They must exit power. That is number one. In our own way, we have educated people. There are people who are taking up cases in courts abroad because there's no point of trying to do it here. We have seen our courts do amazing things that you wonder what law they follow. There are people who are taking up cases in Paris and in London, right, for various aspects of this debt. Human rights lawyers who are doing so out of their own volition pro bono. But this is not about one or two issues, items. It is not about others saving us. It is not about just Jimmy Wanjigi. It is about us collectively saying it is to our demise to continue this. It must be all of us saying we are not going to agree. We are not going to agree that our children were born to be slaves and their children to be even worse slaves than they were. We must say no, and we must collectively come together and agree that that can only come with a dynamic shift that we are seeing today. This is a moment that is earth-shaking for this republic. We use it and do it properly. We will never be chained. We will see greatness in this nation, and you see us stretch this wave beyond the borders of this land. And you shall see somebody called the Great Kenyan that will be more dominant than you're seeing those Western nations. But we must get rid of this chain. This is our chain. No matter what you do, no matter where you go, no matter which way you move, if you do not remove this chain, we are done. There's no other solution. You can talk about all other things you want to talk, but I can tell you, if you do not remove this chain, we are moving nowhere. And anybody telling you they can perform will not perform if they're not talking about removing this chain. All the rest is balderdash, it is lies. You have to remove this chain. And we do not own it. We do not have it. It is actually illegal. So we are educating, Amerix. We are educating. We've taken 2 years. We spent money doing this forensic audit. We are educating. We are talking. We keep speaking. When I first started speaking, I remember people saying, but who understands all these figures, all these terminologies? Kenyans are not about the economy. They want to hear us. I said, one day, Kenya will be about issue orientation. Issues are going to drive their politics, not tribalism. Issues, their lives, their collective lives as a great Kenyans is going to drive them. So I will keep educating. I will keep informing. And you can write me off all you want, but I'll keep speaking. One day, somebody will hear because this pain will not stop. It can only grow. I've given you the figures this financial year, the next financial year, the year after that, and increases even more thereafter. This pain will continue because there's also something else it has set in. There are two twin evils, just to digress a bit in economics. It's called recession and inflation. So at the beginning of the year, everybody was complaining about the high cost of living. Things are very expensive. Then William Ruto says now prices are down. It is so simple in economic terms. When you have inflation, you just tap liquidity. You trap the market, you remove money from the market. So you raise interest rates. Your banks are told to bring in more money to central bank. So you remove liquidity. But when you remove liquidity, now everybody says they have no money in their pocket. Things are very bad. Goods are there, they're still high. They have no money in their pocket because you create recession. And you fast-pace recession. Recession was always there. In other words, the growth of a nation. You stop it, you stunt it, you start going down. And the only way to solve that problem when you have those two twin devils is to reduce taxation. So you give leeway. This government cannot reduce taxation because 80% of it is going towards an item called debt. And William Ruto is so afraid of debt default because it is even more painful. He's so afraid. He's so afraid of even calling it odious and cutting it off because that means an investigation and he doesn't want to be found and they all don't want to be found. They are so afraid of all the options. So I can tell you, even if today you gave him peace to form his government or a new government or people want to join, I can assure you, you'll be back on the streets. This pain won't stop. They have no solution for your lives. They are wasting your time. In fact, I don't even know why he's still in office. The man should just stand up and say, Mimi nimeshindwa, asanteni sana. Let us call a general election. Other people can do this. They have great ideas than I do to solve this problem, or maybe more guts. This has happened to other people in the world. You get to a stage where you cannot solve the problems. I remember in England the other day, in the UK, you had a prime minister, you had 3 prime ministers in 1 year because they could not solve this problem that had been created out of the liquidity out of COVID in the UK. They literally printed money and they couldn't solve it. Now here you have a situation where, if we are to be honest, and Ruto is to be honest with himself, he cannot solve this problem. No matter what he talks, he cannot solve it because he's too tied in it. Don't waste Kenya's time. There are always other people who can do this. Get out of the way. Exit honorably. Usher us through another general election where now Kenyans are listening to the issue. They're not being cheated by marupurupu and goodies to be given. There's no goodies here. We have a problem to solve, because if we solve this problem, our greatness begins. And I say our greatness because it was just interrupted. We were on our way to our greatness, it was interrupted. Our greatness begins. Allow those that the people feel can solve their problem to sit there. You don't have to hang in there. There's nowhere where it says you must have a contract of 5 years.
Hang in there, Jimmy.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
I see my co-host Nyakundi is there. And there is a lady here who was talking about Pan-Africanism and IMF and World Bank. Maybe Nyakundi, can you bring her?
Excuse me. Hello?
Just hold on a minute, Tony. Just a minute.
Tulikuwa taka hawa kubwa kubwa. Tumegonga wangapi? Tumegonga gapi? Wote. Hata Kidiki. Leo rahisi nikekupata kwa kioski ngekununulia chai.
Yes. Where's that lady? Kadhomi.
Good evening, Eric and the team.
Go on.
Yeah, go on. Thank you so much for having me in this space. Just a bit about myself. I have experience in election observation. And lately in 2022, I was a campaign manager. I worked with Azimio, worked with in the side of Mount Kenya with Jubilee Party, and I did a lot of work in these elections, and I have a lot to talk about elections in Kenya because it's something I'm into, and I'm also into governance and public administration as a career. So I know you wanted me to talk about elections. I just go through it like real quick about what exactly happens in our Kenyan election. And I would say the only election that was a people's election in Kenya was 2002, the Kibaki Tosha election. That is the only time that Kenyans were able to get what they voted for. We moved to 2007, where we had the post-election violence, the Kibaki and Raila election. A lot of that election had local manipulation, local players, what people would call, it was a local elite that would manipulate a people's will. That was not a fair election in the country. Even the Electoral Commission then, that was Kivoito then, he died saying that we do not know who won the election. I am saddened because there's no one who has come out to even write a book about the 2007-2008 election, where many Kenyans lost their lives. That was another election that has never been audited. And until today, we do not have a Kenyan election that has been audited. Most of the Kenyan elections are swept under the rugs, and we are made to believe elections have gone in a particular way. And that led to a coalition government after the post-election violence. And of course, the Ruto and Uhuru going to Hague. In 2013, we had the Uhuru and Ruto ticket. Another election that has never been audited. When I say this, we cannot authentically say that this particular individual won an election in Kenya, because there is no election in Kenya from 2007 where we've had servers opened. I will pull this quickly to 2022, the last election. But just to mention, on 2013 election, where we had Akombe resigning, we had them Sando Day, we had a lot of things that happened in that election. But Kenyans, we just want to move on quickly and settle down. But all in these elections, it's not a people's election. In 2013, coming down, our elections have been manipulated externally in a big way. Manipulated, it's a long process. It starts from the funding of IEBC. It starts from monitoring the country a couple of years before the election. Programs, they call them civic education, foreign funded, but these are small ways of programming Kenyan elections. And we pull it all the way to 2022, and people have been asking me, Mary, how do you know this? I have been in this field as an observer, and I've been studying a lot and following the money. Most of the money that comes to IEBC from the development partners, UNDP, it's money that is meant to sway the directions of these Kenyan elections. And even to be brief and to go to exactly in the 2022 elections, you saw the Azimio team went to Chatham House, but what the media tells us is, of course, the European Union, the Western world is taking care of their interests. But that's not what happens. That's where they're doing an interview of who is going to be the president of what country. And now speaking about Kenya. And they qualify these people on how easily they can manipulate them and buy them in their history. And unfortunately, the Azimio team has not been very lucky in being the anointed people. So these are the team which is easily manipulated, which can carry an agenda. The Western agenda in Kenya was anointed for this election. So elections in Kenya start from the very end. They know who they want. They start working backwards. And the media plays a big role in this. Propaganda plays a big role in this, because narratives are set and then we work backwards to the people. One of the elections, these 2022 elections, and I don't know if one day we will ever be able to audit a Kenyan election, because what we get as leadership in this country is not what Kenyans elected. And I will shock you by telling you, high-level campaign secretariats know where the government is headed to. You must have had, like I come from Mount Kenya. In Mount Kenya, we use Jubilee Party. And members of parliament that are vying, utasikia wakisema, serikali inaenda pande gani? It's not everyone who has this information. And for you get the ticket of the side where the government is going. Usually it is not who is popular, it is who has been anointed to be the leader. That's why everyone was scampering for a UDA ticket. All the Jubilee people, they just jumped to this other side and got tickets, actually bought tickets. They just buy these tickets to secure getting another term in parliament. And what I would say, if you study the Cherera for what they were talking about, the results of 2022. But because the country is highly charged, people don't listen to the details. But for example, Kiambu County had an excess of 500,000 votes on one candidate. But people say, these things are very small, they're not going to sway an entire election. Let's not look at them. But those things could sway a whole election. No one has ever looked keenly or talked about Smartmatic and how Kenyan data is diverted and changed, or a logarithm is set to change or sway the data. That is what happens on Kenyan election. This is not local. This is not something done locally. It is an international manipulation of a Kenyan election. Someone needs to write a document about how we've lost our sovereignty. That's why when our president was sworn into office, he has done everything that's a foreign policy. It's not a Kenyan policy. In the Kibaki administration, we had public participation about GMO. Documents sit in parliament. But what did Ruto do? Immediately he came in, he lifted the ban on GMO. No public participation, nothing discussed in parliament, and GMO was allowed in Kenya. Every single loan that is coming to Kenya right now through IMF and World Bank has a social economic agenda attached to it. We give you this loan, you pass this bill, you pass this bill. That's why right now the agriculture bill has been passed. That's why right now it's a criminal activity to carry out agricultural activities unless you have a diploma in agriculture. Otherwise, you face a jail term or a bail. If anyone is willing, lawyers listening to this, please audit every single bill that has been passed in the Kenyan parliament. It's a foreign agenda. It's not a Kenyan agenda. Social economic structures, like on the 24th of July, there's a case, there are Kenyan agriculturists who have come together who are suing because it's now criminal to share seeds in Kenya. These are legislations that have gone through the parliament. That's why I would say this is the worst government I've ever seen as a Kenyan, because no one cares about the bills they have passed in that parliament. Why is our president jumping as high as the foreign masters want him to jump? Because they played a big role in his presidency. He has no stance to fight for the Kenyan people. That's why he was the best candidate for them. And if anyone feels like my sentiments are not true, tell me one single thing he has done that is good for the Kenyan people. Even this finance bill is all a social economic structure attached to IMF funding. When you study all these things that have happened in this country, you realize the foreign hand in the Kenyan democracy, it is so huge. And I will shock you when I tell you, even on the opposition side, high level, they always know where the presidency is going. I will shock you to tell you, even Raila knew, let me do this thing to maintain my backyard, to maintain the control of half of the country. He has a big following. To control Azimio, to have a big number members of parliament in parliament. But he knew he's not going to ascend to presidency because he sort of lost the willingness to keep fighting, because it's a big monster to fight. When the election is done, he'll quickly be meeting the ambassadors. He'll quickly be meeting the EU commissioners, because the players that have to manipulate both sides. That's why even now, his AU seat is really attached to these foreign bodies. They just want to balance an equilibrium in Kenya, because we are the products in the market. We are the slaves. They're squeezing every little life out of us as they manipulate a sitting government and manipulate an opposition. And as we sit here, discussions are underway of building a government of sort of national unity. I don't know if they're going to call it coalition. And they think that is going to quell the cry of Kenyans right now. They just want a working situation to continue pushing their social economic agendas, which are not Kenyan, which are not for the good of any Kenyan. And you will see they are going to have cabinet positions next week, and you will see what these people are doing. They are working together. If they were not working together, none of these players is coming out clearly and listening to what Kenyans are saying. Because what Kenyans are saying, this government is not fighting for us. Even on the smallest level, this government is not fighting for Kenyans. For the people that can study and do this, if you study the Venezuelan hand in the Kenyan government, it was huge. The foreigners played a big role in diverting the will of the people. And I will tell you again and again, what you see today is not what Kenyans voted. Thank you, Eric, for your time.
Oh, what do you mean?
My Lord, I wonder. I wonder.
What I'm going to teach you in.
So, Cyprian, go on. I can't take this.
Okay, thank you, Eric. Allow me to bring in Mr. Tony Gashoka into the broadcast. So kindly, you can proceed.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Can you hear me? This is an important subject because it's dealing with economic pain. Economic pain is actually the whole purpose of any government. And unfortunately for ourselves right now, the government is not being held to account. When the framers of the 2010 Constitution put it together, under Article 4, which declared Kenya to be a republic, there was the provision that Kenya is a sovereign republic under Part 1, but under Part 2, the Republic of Kenya shall be a multi-party democratic state founded on national values and the principles of government that follow Article 10. The reason that I'm bringing this up is because the only way in which a democratic republic can function is when the government of the day is held to account by the people of the country. Hello? Am I being heard?
Yes. Go on. We can hear you.
And I want to bring this alarm because Jimmy Wanjigi was speaking competently about what the executives have been doing wrong. And he was talking about the need for us, the people, to hold that government to account. But the only reason that we are being asked to hold the government to account is because of the complete failure of the opposition. And therefore, we cannot have any discussion about progressing Kenya with only Ruto must go. There must include the removal of this parliament and this Senate. Because the President Ruto, when he came into office, his first act was to buy political parties. All of you saw how quickly he moved to do that. And where he could not buy the parties, he bought individual members of parliament. Under our constitution, which is modeled under the Westminster model, the opposition is meant to be an official opposition with equal power to a government so that they can oppose the government of the day in order that the people can get a better government. And the public finances in the consolidated fund are meant to fund that opposition equally as they fund a cabinet and as they fund the presidency. So that at any point, the country is having a mirror. Our country is having a dual view, dual highway as to what is happening in the country. And since we allowed Ruto to raid the opposition benches and to actually assume the majority leader in parliament, when actually Azimio won the majority of members in parliament, then nobody is holding Ruto to account. Traditionally, the watchdogs in parliament, the Parliamentary Accounts Committee, the Public Investment Committee are chaired by the opposition. And the constitution under the Westminster model envisaged that a government cannot police itself. It must be policed by the opposition. And the Attorney General and the Auditor General and all the heads of any corporation or ministry were required to go to either committee for scrutiny, the same way they would have to go if the president was to summon them. And these are the reports, for example, that came during the Goldenberg scandal, during the Moi time, during the Kibaki time, the agro-leasing scandal, and so forth. But now what you have is the executive in full control of parliament, in full control of the executive, and therefore there is no accountability. And the citizens, as Jimmy is saying, we need to educate people, but the level at which we are educating the people means they don't have the access to government records. And unless Jimmy had put the kind of money he did to get the forensic audit, it was not possible. Yet the Constitution provides that we, the people, fund the opposition, and they have access to government records, have got access to everything so that they can give us this information. So as a people, we should never have reached this position if Parliament and if the opposition was